Vox Pops. This footage containing public opinion. The purpose of doing so is to gain more validity in our argument. We developed this convention as instead of using typical mise-en-scène, where the location is clear, we used a blue background, which we edited to include an emoji background. We also consciously placed the Vox Pops on the right or left side of the screen in order to show a difference of opinions. When applying Stewart Hall's theory, we can see a clear divide in opinions, which makes the preferred reading where we want the audience to choose the side of the argument. We want the audience to think that emojis can coexist alongside language. Through mediation, although we say that there's an argument, we choose questions in the Vox Pop which show the audience favouring emojis. This means we want the audience to be biased in the argument for emojis. The secondary audience Vox Pop feature adults who have to guess the emoji phrase. On purpose, I have chosen footage where they get the questions wrong, as through gatekeeping, I wanted to show a clear divide between the primary and secondary audience in order to show at least some argument. As the genre of my documentary is expository, so verbal commentary is a necessity, but there is also some argumentative logic behind it. To some extent, this does challenge the conventions, as this is not your typical public opinion Vox Pop. We are actively trying to show that there's a generational gap between adults and children by actually showing the adults getting the game wrong. I took inspiration from YouTube videos such as Emoji Challenge, as the Emoji Challenge, where people try to guess emoji phrases. This showed how people can be easily confused when translating emojis, which backs up our documentary argument. This is further demonstrated if you apply Levi Strauss's theory of binary opposites, as we see both sides are supporting emojis as a language. Another example of binary opposites is also shown with the age of the people in the documentary, so we can see a clear divide between the adults and the teenagers in regards to the generational gap in understanding emojis. Experts. These are people that are specialised in our topic, and the purpose is to make our documentary more plausible. We followed conventions. In some aspects, the experts do show support of emojis. They do not completely debunk the idea. Our two experts were chosen through mediation as we wanted to perpetuate the idea that although emojis may not completely replace language, they can still be used in today's society. Our choice of experts was an English teacher, which followed conventions, as in many documentaries it is normal to have someone who is specialised in the topic you are talking about. We took inspiration from this clip from The History of Emoji by Vice, where there was an expert that was specially knowledgeable in the topic.
9% of communication on a regular day is through technology.
Our second expert was a volunteer at a children's hospital. This developed the convention, as although she is not an expert on English language, she portrayed realism and verisimilitude through the use of emojis in real-life contexts, such as in the hospital that she works in with kids. Although the documentary was informal, there was an aspect of a serious tone in the documentary, as portrayed by the expert as she talks about how troubled children can use emojis to communicate, which even more so makes our argument more valid. Mise-en-scène. This is everything that is within a scene. The purpose of doing so is so it relates to the topic and makes it obvious that our documentary is about emojis as a language. Throughout our documentary, we wanted to immediately establish the context of each scene. Therefore, we followed conventions by making scenes where the expert have a background that was related to emojis. We showcased computer screens in each scene with the experts, which contributed to the argument in relation to emojis. For example, in Mike Green's interview, his computer screen featured an article on whether emojis are destroying language. In addition, mise-en-scène is also shown through his choice of clothing, which is quite formal and teacher-like. He is also sitting at a desk similar to his teacher profession, where he would typically be sitting in a classroom. In other documentaries, such as the BBC documentary Addicted to Protein, their profession is also shown when, for example, a professor of human physiology is shown wearing a sports hoodie in a gym-like setting. This is where he would be typically researching his subjects. I wanted to follow this convention and portray it also in my documentary. Our documentary was mainly shot inside the college. The reasoning for doing so is because we are arguing if emojis are affecting the way children are learning, and the college is a environment where children do learn. Animation/graphic. These are animated designs used in the documentary to make it more interesting and visually pleasing. The whole documentary relies on semiotics. Emojis themselves are semiotics that are seeking to be interpreted by people. We show a range of graphics, including in the beginning and in our vox pops. Here we use a range of sound effects and emoji graphics to denote certain meanings. For example, in this scene we added these emojis to denote what the audience's favourite emojis were. This fit in with the overall genre because we related it back to it. The reasoning behind using this code and conventions and why it is so prevalent is because emojis themselves as a symbol connotes excitement and fun. It is an animated symbol that is informal, therefore it made sense to include graphics and animations in a documentary, and a serious formal tone would not be suitable for a documentary. In documentary examples we explored such as emojis among us. They all contain graphics within real life settings. This was something that was interesting and fun to look at, so visually we took inspiration and added graphics to our vox pop and introduction so the audience wouldn't lose interest. Opening. This is the introduction to the documentary, which is the ultimate deciding factor for the audience to see if they want to watch it. From the opening, the documentary immediately establishes the concept of binary opposites. That's it. From your Facebook mums to your teens, almost everyone is using them. This lays the basis for the narrative of our documentary. This perpetuates the idea that emojis are evidently used by everyone, but it also foreshadows the dividing opinions that occur later in the documentary.
What if emojis became their own language?
Our opening is fast-paced and lays down the basis of what our documentary is going to argue. We follow this convention by making our own introduction fast-paced and adding in clips of emojis to ensure that this is what the topic and genre of the documentary is. In a majority of documentaries, for example Amy, they have fast-paced introductions to immediately capture the audience's attention. Statistics. Many documentaries use statistics in order to back the claims that they make. Our documentary follows these conventions by also using statistics, however we use them creatively by putting them in the form of an iPhone message with emojis representing each age group. In order to portray the realism and validity, we use these statistics in order to show that emojis are in fact used by older adults as well. This created an opposing view that they may have come from a negotiating or oppositional reading that parents do not use emojis. This convention is vital as we are creating a valid argument which suggests that emojis may not be a generational thing after all. We took inspiration from documentaries such as Benefit Streets, where they especially use statistics that add to the shock value of the documentary. There is a concept of moral panic in our documentary and other documentaries in general, where the audience will start to worry that maybe emojis could be causing more damage to us than they realise, that everyone is starting to use them, so they may be taking over more than they thought. We didn't challenge conventions as much as we could have, as it would lead to a more dramatised form of documentary. Grierson argued that documentaries fail to represent realistic events in documentaries. As I followed and mostly used convention, it is expected that some topics are exaggerated, but they are done in a way that portrays the argument in an entertaining way. For example, when the adults decide for the emojis, it is not a clear representation of all adults, but it is still entertaining. Rather than dramatising for materialistic values, the documentary is thought-provoking and actually has a stable argument, which is, will emojis ruin the language or develop it? In no way is the documentary pointless. Documentaries that offer materialistic values, such as Educating Essex, which explores the lives of students but doesn't really have an investigation aspect to it, is pretty much futile.